Okay, so I'm moving on from thread sewing to ribbon work, and ribbon is great for filling in lots of gaps and creating kind of bright colour that you don't necessarily get with embroidery floss and that kind of thing. So and with ribbon there are two different ways of doing it, or two sets of techniques. So first it's applique, which essentially means applying. So you're applying ribbon to the surface. You're not necessarily sewing through with the ribbon. And applique techniques are better for most fabrics. So this cotton will be great. Any other fabric is fine for applique techniques. But when you come to actually sewing ribbon, you need something that's really quite open weave. Otherwise, you can't get the ribbon through without actually damaging the ribbon or damaging yourself. And plaster on the finger proves that, because I've been sewing through my embroidery project with ribbon and caused a number of blisters that keep appearing. So yeah, I'm starting with the very basic ribbon applique. So starting with a spiderweb flower. So just using some regular sewing thread or embroidery floss, you need to make a frame. So for these it's usually 5 arms. Catch through the ribbon just below the knot. Tie that into place. As I said, if your fabric is open weave, you don't need to do this step, you can just sew through the fabric. So that's this one started. I'm going to switch to a really big needle with the biggest hole, biggest eye I've got. So I'm just going to thread through my ribbon, and just so it doesn't come off, I'm going to take the end and sew through that, and that will lock the ribbon onto the needle here. Now this needle doesn't need to be sharp because I'm not using the sharp end. So I'm going to fold over like that and just start weaving the ribbon through. Just make sure you go over where your knot is so that gets tucked underneath. So you just continue around. Depending on the size of your frame, the size you want your flower to be, do this as many times as you want. Just make sure your knot is always tucked underneath. Make sure it pulls tight, because in the end you don't want to see any of the support. Okay, so this is my spiderweb rose. It's nice and full. You can no longer see the supporting structure. So as I said, you can go any size you like. About inch and a half is good, a good size. Thereafter it gets a little boring really to look at, and if you can do 2 or 3 different shades of colour, that also gives it more kind of life and pop. So now I'm working on a gathered rose. Now here I've got 2 pieces of ribbon of similar but different colours, and I'm just stitching together with a loose running stitch along the bottom here. Now choose your colours however you like. It does kind of look better if you either go for a much darker or a much lighter colour underneath, and your contrasting or whatever colour needs to be about half the width of the top colour. This isn't quite there, I didn't have the ribbon I wanted, but if you go for about ½ inch for your main piece, and then about ¼ inch for the inner line. So I've got here about 2.5 foot, which is about 45 centimetres in length. So I'm just going down the line. Not going to go all the way. I've essentially rolled over and just kind of stuck a loop of stitch around one end, and I'll do the same when I get to the other in a moment. Just stitch through. Then you want to gather, so if you lay it down on your work surface and work out where your kind of midpoint is, your mid-size is, and just pull through and kind of bunch and gather along the length until it's about half the length that you started with. So if you just kind of bring down the gather so you've got a fairly even amount of gathering going on, at about there. And then just to fix that in place, just run a couple of stitches through, just so it won't pull out during the next process. So then you go to your piece and the middle of where you want your flower to be, and just want to stitch this end into place. Like that. And then come around a little ways and stitch again. And you want to stitch down on this inside edge every 2 or 3 millimeters as you go around. Stitches are as close to the middle as possible so they're not seen in between the layers. And use matching thread, or thread that will be concealed neatly. I'm using a bright red here because I want to be able to see how well I've done it essentially at this stage. So I'm getting to the end, and a stitch or two away. Okay, and for your last stitch you want to turn that corner inwards. So that any raw edges that might pop out are tucked underneath. Give that a couple of stitches just to secure it into place. And just kind of plump it a bit, and that's a gathered rose. So they're two very simple applique techniques for using ribbon on the surface of fabric.